Do you think this would be getting nearly as much attention from, say, us and everybody else who's doing this if we were in a bull market?
Yeah, this is something I was thinking about recently. Yeah, so let's just say for hypothetical purposes that Tesla was still at like the 300 level. It's just been like flat for the last couple months. For sure, we wouldn't care. Like, oh, there's Elon sticking it to the man again. All right, Elon. But like, because everybody's hurting here so much, it's like, oh gosh, Elon, do you have to, we're certainly overly emotionalizing it based on the short-term stock price. I think that I struggle to see anybody kind of say, no, that's not happening. Because it is emotional. It is, hard. And, especially like in Emmett and my shoes, where we're managing people's money. I think it's a lot harder for money managers too, who have, performance that is taking a hit from sticking with this company and with this guy who we believe in, but is, doing things that are really hurting in the short term.
Yeah. Do you think he has a fiduciary duty to not be so outspoken? And this is probably a loaded question, but I'm happy to give you my take too. Like, how do you view that?
Well, I mean, like the fiduciary duty is a very like strict legal requirement, and so if from a legalistic standpoint, no, he doesn't have a duty to not be controversial. He has a duty to not like materially hurt the stock by acting in his own self-interest or something like that. And I'm not a lawyer, so I don't know exactly what the red lines are, but he's clearly not stepping on them. Otherwise he'd be, prosecuted. So like, I think he could do a better job of trying to act in his shareholders' interests. And I think the selling on Tesla just in those huge blocks, like Gary's had some great commentary about how the way that he went about those sales was done in a way that really hurt the stock price. And so he like, I don't understand why he didn't, try to do like a pipe transaction with that, or like something that was, you could do in like big blocks to private buyers, in a way that didn't just like tank the stock $20 in like an hour. Like it was very apparent with the way that he sold on those days that he was selling. So yeah, I mean, he's done some things that I think were not in the best interest of shareholders. But I'm curious, what's your take? You've clearly thought about this too.
Yeah, for sure. By the way, shout out to the 1,072 people on YouTube, a little over 250 on Spaces. Thank you all very much for joining us today. Yeah, I mean, the way I think about it is that Elon is a disruptor first and foremost, and he's proven that multiple times. And so what's happening now is that he is entering a stage of his life, a stage of his career, where the things that he's looking to disrupt are not just engineering challenges, but like social. They are much more public facing. And it's very uncomfortable. It's very, very uncomfortable. But that's how true innovation and disruption feels like, right? The question becomes, is this on purpose, or is this an action that is truly going to jeopardize the company? Or is this just a phase that is quote unquote needed to be able to reach the next stage of whatever the individual is trying to build? And I think that is what's so confusing about this whole thing, because it's not clear that that's the case. Whereas I think in the past, Elon was very good at making that as a clear thing to be part of the future. So if I'm going to draw a parallel, the current Twitter landscape, the media landscape, the free speech landscape is legacy auto. And Elon's like, hammer, boom, here comes Tesla. And Tesla is how he's approaching all this stuff, right? And again, this could be me giving him way too much credit in how he approaches problem solving. But part of me wonders, like, okay, so maybe that's what it is. And maybe that's what it is. Maybe that's where he's, people have been very critical of him in the past in how he approaches some things that he's building. And because he's in a completely different environment, that could very much be the case, is that we're not used to that kind of person. But at the same time, I do think that there are some obvious missteps that he makes from time to time, specifically tied to communication, that are just not, it's 100% avoidable. And one of the things I like to throw back on Elon is like, he always says, the best part is no part, right? The best process is no process. The best noise is no noise. Okay. Yeah, so like, bro, come on. how about you take your own advice from time to time? So, but again, I think it's a reminder that we're all human. I think there's another piece of it too, and I may have been guilty of this, and I might still be guilty of this, to this day, is that Elon's a very aspirational figure. He's somebody that a lot of people look up to. He's somebody that has changed the game in so many different ways that people can't be helped but be drawn to that person. And sometimes when that person doesn't act in like what fits your moral sort of standing, and you have some dissonance and confliction, if that's even a word, there's two things that happen. You either lean in harder into, yes, this is totally what he means, or you're like just completely distraught because this person that you had such high hopes for is not acting in a way that's befitting of what you had in mind for that person. And I think that's another part of it too. And ultimately, it's like the dude's just, I think it just comes down to, do you trust the individual or not? And for me, I think he has a track record of trust. I think he has a track record of execution, but he's clearly not perfect. And so I try to put all of this within that lens. And when I think about fiduciary duty, I look at it that way. It's like the dude's trying. He's trying, and it's okay for him to come out and say his opinions. The question becomes, is that a big enough impact to how his businesses sort of operate that it's going to derail it and really hurt investors? And I don't think that's the case. I just think he's ruffling a lot of feathers that are like, why are you ruffling them? But you ruffling them doesn't, I think, impact the long-term potential of the things that you're allowing the people to invest in. But like the question still stands up, but like, why?
Well, I think like all of his behavior recently, I think is actually really consistent with all of his choices, even going back to like founding SpaceX and Tesla. Like the reason that he founded these companies to begin with because they were, existential threats to humanity, like having like a backup copy plus of civilization on Mars and being multiplanetary to ensure our long-term civilization. Like that's why he started SpaceX. Like it wasn't to make money. Nobody thought you would make money with a rocket startup in 2006 or whenever they were founded. Much less an electric car company. But he did that because he really believed in the importance of, sustainable energy generation and transportation. So like the reason, like now that they're successful and, Tesla's generating a lot of cash flow, I think like the narrative has switched a little bit where people are like, oh, like, yeah, like he's just like a businessman and he should really like, stick to that. But in my mind, it's like, no, like he's still trying to solve like existential threats to humanity. And it's like free speech is one, the whole woke mind virus thing. Now, a lot more people disagree with him that those are like actual threats to civilization and to humanity. But the logic is just as applicable in my mind of like following like, oh yeah, I am going to pick these fights because nobody else is doing it. Like the media is just getting worse and worse. Like objectively, I'm pretty sure nobody trusts the media anymore. So like you've got that, I forget what do they call it? Like the fourth branch of government, or there's some term like that where, like the thing that was supposed to keep government power in check is no longer functioning. And so like we need some alternative way to do it now in the 21st century. And you've got
checks and balances.
There was a different phrase I was trying to think of, but my recall is impaired by my lack of sleep with all the kids. The best controversy is no controversy. Somebody said the best tweet is no tweet, and Elon clearly believes that the best, oh God, my brain is going out at the worst possible time. The worst birth control is no birth control. That's what I was going to say. I didn't even say that. I totally botched it. Sorry about that.
It's all good.
But anyway, he's clearly like focused on trying to solve these problems. And like SpaceX and Tesla are doing relatively well now. And so now he's trying to turn his attention toward Twitter to really improve the quality of public discourse so that we can talk about, things like whatever the next coronavirus is. And he's clearly being very critical of Fauci right now because he didn't like the way that was handled by the media and by Twitter in particular. And so, I think like people are saying, oh, he's picking fights with all these like distinguished people and everything. And I think that's very intentional. And I think he's doing it not in any sort of like change of behavior or change of mindset. In my mind, it's actually entirely consistent with the way that he's been doing things for the last 2 decades.